We're now live. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening. My name is Denise Horlin. I'm the City Council President for the City of Plantation, and I am thrilled on behalf of the city tonight to introduce tonight's parenting series in partnership with Nova Southeastern University. Tonight, we'll be kicking off with Parenting in the COVID-19 Age, the Importance of Self-Care, hosted by Dr. Scott Polin and Dr. Elizabeth Hillman. The next in our series, hosted by Dr. Shannon Wharton, will be on Tuesday, October 12th at 6:30 p.m. We Can Do Hard Things Part 1, Managing Difficult Feelings. And on Tuesday, November 9th at 6:30 p.m., We Can Do Hard Things 2, Conversations with Kids. And now I'd like to introduce our host this evening. Dr. Scott Polin is a professor at the College of Psychology and the director of the Suicide and Violence Prevention Office at Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale. He previously directed psychological services for a large Texas school system for 24 years and is a past president of the National Association of School Psychologists and has testified about the mental health needs of children before the U.S. Congress on 4 occasions. He previously received the Houston Wage Peace Award and the Helping Parkland Heal Award. Dr. Elizabeth Hillman is a licensed psychologist in private practice and an adjunct faculty clinical supervisor in the school-related psychological assessments and clinical interventions clinic at Nova Southeastern University. She holds a master's degree in developmental psychology from Cornell University, where she earned a National Science Foundation graduate fellowship. So I am thrilled tonight to welcome Dr. Polin and Dr. Hillman, and thank you very much for hosting this webinar with the City of Plantation this evening.
Thank you very much, Denise. We're very thankful for all of you and tuning in tonight and your time. We hope to say some things that'll be helpful and meaningful to every single one of you. One thing that we know, you care about your children, and that's why you tuned in tonight. And you know, I'm a parent, Dr. Hillman is a parent, and I want to give you one example from many years ago. Our son was small. He could still ride in the grocery cart. And I'm picking out some bananas. And I hear this little voice say, "Dad, am I the boy you always wanted?" It gave me a chance to say enthusiastically, absolutely. And I have a really simple thought for you. Tonight, just let your children know, yes, they are the sons and daughters that you always dreamed about. Not for a person they might become someday, just enjoy them for the person they are today. And you know, a message that I had over and over for Parkland parents, it's actually a pretty simple one. When a child lives in a stable home, when they're shown unconditional love every day, every way by their parents, that child can overcome almost anything. So thank you for your time tonight. And just know, all children do far more right than wrong. In fact, I love what's called the 5-to-1 rule. Point out 5 things somebody did right for every negative thing or little zap that we give them. And if I had, you know, one really key point that I said just yesterday in a webinar is that adults, we need to listen to children. We need to find the shared time they will talk to us. And I could always tell with our 4 children, when I talk too much, when I ask too many questions, all of a sudden they stop talking. So a really key thing is about listening. And 2 words as a psychologist that I rarely use, I understand. Could we really? Help me to understand. We also have a tendency to give too much advice and to tell somebody it's going to be okay. It's a very challenging world. It was a challenging world before COVID-19. And then there's all the technology that young people are exposed to today. We're going to give you some of our thoughts on all of those things. And I'll turn it back to Dr. Hillman.
Thank you, Dr. Polin. I'm also just thrilled to be here. Thank you to the City of Plantation. You have a city with wonderful schools, wonderful staff and administrators, all who care about your children. But the reason we're all here, I'm sure, is because we're parents or grandparents or guardians of children. And we know that the stresses of COVID piled on top of the stresses that were already in place before COVID have caused a lot of stress and anxiety in our families. And we know that our stress is our children's stress, just like their stress is our stress. If they are having difficulties at school, if they're having difficulties with friends, if they're struggling with health problems or have special needs, and just the tumultuous times of moving through childhood, growing up, entering puberty, getting them off to college. There's so many opportunities for us to be there for our kids, like Dr. Poland said, and so many opportunities for us to feel like we are not quite cutting it. And we're here today to support you, the parents who give their dedication, nurturing, the miles that you drive, the time that you spend. It's just incredible how many amazing parents we have who are devoted to their children. And we know that's why you're here. Just to cover briefly what we're going to talk about a little bit is these are difficult times. How do we as parents maintain some kind of peace of mind? How do we become aware of what are the things that get us stressed? How do we notice that in our bodies? Where do we feel it? Are we skipping meals or are we eating too much? Are we staying awake at night? Are we feeling tension, getting headaches? How can we be aware of ourselves enough to know when to implement a self-care plan? And what could that look like? What kind of perspective can we keep on what our kids are going through? See their behaviors as maybe signs that they need some help, maybe cries for help, that they're having difficulty, there's something going on in their lives, there's something in their environment. How can we talk to them in helpful ways so that we're aware and alert about what they're experiencing? And third, how can we know what are the real warning signs when we need to seek out professional guidance? So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Poland to get started on what are these challenges of the COVID age.
You know, I came up with this little model at the beginning of the pandemic. And, you know, most of all, I hope you and all of your loved ones have been safe and healthy. We all want it to be over. Unfortunately, it's not over. But, you know, I used the word calm, the C standing, of course, for trying to stay calm as much as possible. But also we have to think about what can we control, which is really our reactions to things. And children thrive on consistency and routine. And of course, we know a lot of children were isolated for various parts of the pandemic. We know that that pandemic quarantine didn't necessarily go well for all children and families. And a lot of adults, including me, made some mistakes, maybe overreacted, said some things that I didn't really mean. You know, when that happens, we just need to apologize and say, I should have handled that better. And very importantly, being available to listen to your child. You know, our son loved basketball. You know what he knew? Virtually any time, day or night, he'd say, Dad, will you rebound? I'd go outside no matter how tired I was, turn the lights on in the driveway, and I'm not saying a word. I'm just a nice chest pass back. And Jeremy's relaxed. He's shooting. He does something he really enjoys. Pretty soon he's talking to me, telling me all those things I really want to know about because I'm his dad. And I would respond with something based on years of graduate study with my best, wow, I'm not sure, son. That's a tough one. What are you thinking? Please know your kids don't want you to say, do this, do that. They just want you to listen and recognize the challenges they face. And of course, we must be also alert when we have children that have changes. And if I could say one overarching thing that I wish all of us were able to do at this difficult time, it would be get the proper amount of rest. When we're well rested, we can really deal with all the challenges of life. And I may not be the only one that basically turned off the news at various points, because that news coverage of the overwhelmed ICU units and moving portable morgues next to hospitals, that really didn't help me. In fact, I convinced my partner, let's not turn on the news in the morning. With what little time we have, let's take a walk. Let's get outside. Let's get some exercise. And the M could stand for so many things. But the bottom line is, Dr. Hilsman said, your children, they're looking at you. They're looking at you to see how to respond to this difficult time. We need to model optimism. We need to model hope. We need management and consistency in our homes. And in our building, there's actually, in the hallway, there's a poster. It says, life is a struggle right now, but there will be a future. And that is something we all need to recognize. Yes, we've been in unprecedented times. It's been quite a struggle, but your modeling of how you're coping with this is really a key determinant to how well your children do. Let's look at this slide. Talks about, maybe just for a moment, take a deep breath. Have the thought, we'll all get through this. Things will be better. I can manage this. I will truly be there for my family. Now imagine every single one of you, if I said, think of the person that gives you the benefit of their negativity every time you see them. Well, I'm asking you, stay away from that person. Seek out the people in your life that are positive, that are encouraging, and be that encouraging person for others. And take advantage of the increased time that you have with your children and family. And again, your reaction is really almost everything to how your children will respond. And set a goal of your family being more connected than ever before because of what everything we're going through together. So back to you, Dr. Hilsman.
Well, I love that example you give of listening to your son, because we can only know how our children are doing if they'll talk to us. And of course, there are developmental phases where they don't really want to talk to their parents, right? And finding another person maybe who can take that role in their life is helpful. But if we're going to have a chance of getting our kids to talk to us, we want to be that open, kind, loving, non-judgmental person, right? When they come home with a grade that we didn't expect, boy, it's really easy to overreact and think, wow, what is this going to do to your GPA? But if we can just hold back for an extra minute, take that deep breath, and really try to ask them what their concerns are. Approach them with warmth and caring and with the same kind of respect that we would want if someone was going to be talking to us. Let's see if we can hold off on some of the criticism. As we jump into fall, the temptation is to get over-involved, over-scheduled, stressed out of our minds again, right? It's exciting for a lot of kids to get back and see their friends, but we need to just stay in touch with them. Are they doing too much? Have they bitten off more than they could chew, right? So we want to listen to them, empathize, validate their concerns. We can express our concerns too, but let's first prioritize listening, and then let's problem solve together. Another thing we might want to change, given the year, more than a year, that the kids have, a lot of them, been home during COVID, we may want to rethink our definition of success, right? How excited or disappointed we are about our child often has to do with what are our expectations of them. And if our expectation is perfection, hopefully it never was, but if it was, we need to redefine that now. This is the time, as they're starting a new school year, to start the school year right by really paying attention just as much to what kind of person are they growing into? What lessons did they learn through COVID that they can bring with them into the rest of their lives? So are they more aware of their strengths and weaknesses? Are we? Can we use our strengths to really bolster our weaknesses and get through difficult patches? Are we better at problem solving, planning, adapting, flexibility, all those frontal lobe functions that are so much needed in today's life and in today's kids, especially, we want them to become more autonomous, more independent as they get more mature. They need to do more than just follow directions, right? So we want to look at all these amazing capacities our kids are developing. Can they reach out for help when they have trouble? Can they get up and try again when they make a mistake? Can we? Can we apologize? Can we empathize with others? Can we talk about our problems together and come out of this better? So if we can just lower the bar from having to have those straight A's right away, having to jump back into every single activity full force, we can take some of those pressures off of our kids right now.
It's very challenging, the times we live in. Challenging before the pandemic, even more challenging now. There's a lot of pressure on young people to get a certain GPA, to have a certain class rank. What I share whenever I have the opportunity is I was kicked out of college the first time for poor scholarship. I would have been a really bad accountant. I think I found my way and I did okay. Just know that it's not going to go perfectly for every one of your children. And your love and support is critical for every aspect of all the challenges in their lives. I made this statement today on the radio. There's been a lot of concerns locally. There have been some threats of violence. Kids have threatened to shoot up their schools. And I think we'd be remiss tonight not to say a few things about that. I wish every parent would sit around the table and talk with their children about, today, you can't even joke about school violence. You can't say it. You shouldn't post it. The conversations could be, the consequences, could be extremely severe. So it's important that kids really think carefully before they say and post some of the things that have to do with violence. And all that technology that all your children are into, in my opinion, it's a privilege. It's not a right. And what's that really mean for you? Go slow in terms of the technology access you give children. Make sure it is developmentally appropriate. Always know the passwords. Have you ever walked into a room and all of a sudden the computer is quickly turned away from you, or maybe the history trail is being erased? That means you need to have a conversation with your child. And Common Sense Media is a really wonderful organization that provides a lot of guidance to parents about what's called digital citizenship. Once something is posted, it's like it's going to be there. And there's actually a great app that I would encourage you to talk with your children about. It's called the Rethink app. When it's on their phone, when it's on their computer, and when there's really hurtful, harmful, mean, nasty language, it basically gives the kid a message. Maybe you'd like to rethink this. Maybe you could state this in just a little nicer way. So it's a great challenge today to actually take charge of your child's media. And the bottom line, it's interfering with sleep. When kids go to bed with their cell phone, their iPad, their laptop, there's some data out there that says about 1/3 of adolescent girls wake up in the middle of the night to see who might have posted what. And in one of these meetings, it happened to be in a suburb of Atlanta, I was saying, take charge of your child's technology. It's 10:30 at night. It's time for you to go to bed. I'll have everything charged and give it to you in the morning. And the mom stayed behind, basically said to me, but what if my daughter's friends need to reach her at 2:30 in the morning? Well, what's wrong with your daughter's friend? If something is so upsetting, they need to talk to their own parents. I didn't convince that mom. She walked away believing her daughter needed to be available 24/7. Sadly, lots of children have experienced traumatic events and losses. You know, more than 650,000 Americans have died from this virus. Some kids lost grandparents, parents, neighbors, maybe a swim coach, maybe somebody who was the choir director at church. So we need to always be there for them. Let's go on and look at the next slide. So substance abuse. And all I can do tonight is tell you what I truly believe based on more than 40 years of working with young people. Too many communities ignore the problem of underage drinking. You know what I said to our children? The law is 21. I will never look the other way. I will never condone it. I will certainly never provide it. And in my humble opinion, all of your grandparents were alcoholics. Unfortunately, alcoholism runs in our family. I hope you don't drink at all, but be careful because alcoholism is a tremendous problem. And we could go on and on about, obviously, there's lots of other illicit substances out there, but you need to be on top of this. You know, one teenager, her mom said to her, Dr. Poland says, I have a right to know. I've got a drug testing kit right here on the kitchen counter. If I'm worried, you're going to give me a urine sample and we're going to find out. So please pay attention to the substance abuse problem for the adolescents in our community. Now, the most dangerous thing your kid does, the most dangerous thing all of us do, we get in the car. And I love that phrase, don't be intoxicated. So if you text while you drive your car, your children are going to do absolutely the same thing. Emerson had a great quote. It goes like this: what we do speaks so loudly to our children that when we try to talk to them, they can't hear us. They're watching your behavior in the car. Do you text and drive? Do you drink and drive? They're watching how you treat your neighbor. When you go to school, how do you treat the principal or the teacher? And you know, having worked full-time in education for 26 years, educators care about your children. They truly want to help them. And if one of them points out a problem that your child might have, don't be defensive. Work with the Broward schools and everybody be on the same page to help children improve their behavior. Now, there's the actual order of the deaths of children. Accidents are number 1. Suicide is number 2. Homicide is number 3. I was the go-to crisis guy in my district in Texas with 110,000 students. First of all, I went into so many classrooms the day after that classmate was killed in a car accident. Modeling also includes wearing seatbelts. It includes paying attention to how your children drive. If you know they have a problem with distractibility and impulsivity, maybe they shouldn't be driving at the earliest opportunity. And Florida has graduated driving laws. You know what those actually say? 16-year-olds shouldn't drive after dark for about 6 months. 16-year-olds shouldn't have anybody in the car under the age of 21 for about 6 months. If those were enforced, lives would be saved. And I need to say something about schools. Our schools are the safest places children go. Now, having said that, one shooting in a school in America is unacceptable, but about 1% of the murders of children occur at school. The other 99% are in our homes and in our communities. And at some point tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about depression and suicide. Suicide kills more young people every year than all of the diseases you can think of combined. So I'm going to show you some data from Florida, the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey. By the way, they survey high school students on virtually every at-risk behavior you could think of. But tonight, we're only going to talk for a short time about what the high school students say about depression, sadness, suicide. So right at 1/3 of them felt sad or hopeless 2 or 3 or more weeks in a row. So parents sometimes say this to me. And by the way, we're going to take some questions at the end tonight. A parent will say, how do I know she's really depressed? She's a teenager, right? They're moody, they're irritable. I think she's preparing me for she's going away to Florida State next year. Let me ask you some questions, Mom and Dad. Is this persistent? Has this gone on for 2 or 3 weeks or more? Is it pervasive? Is it affecting home, school, peers, pretty much every aspect of their lives? Yes. Has she dropped out of something that was previously pleasurable? Yes. She was on the dance team for years. I couldn't believe it. She said, I don't care about it anymore. You've got a depressed teenager. About 20% of them suffer from depression at some point during those tumultuous years. The bottom line, most of them never get any help whatsoever. Reach out to a school counselor, a school psychologist, visit the Psychology Service Center on our campuses, contact someone like Dr. Hilsman in private practice. Don't hesitate to get help for your child. Now, there's a rather sobering statistic, and I'm not in my office tonight, but I was in my office last night. And so I said, I can see Nova Public High School out the window. For simple math, let's say they have 2,000 students. So what's that last figure mean? Our best estimate, 158 kids that walked into that high school this morning already made a suicide attempt in the last 12 months. You know what's really scary to me? For the most part, the adults in their lives don't even know. Who would know all about it? That would be their friends. But did anybody ever talk with young people about what to do if you have these thoughts? What to do if your friend is talking about suicide or homicide? And at the simplest level, I wish every teacher in the Broward schools tomorrow would have an activity to help every student basically identify their go-to trusted adult at school. And if they can't identify one, then we're not working enough on making connections between students and staff. The middle school data, it's equally alarming. The most dramatic rise in suicide rates has actually been for middle school age youth and children of color. But the middle schoolers, they're asked the question over their lifetime. The high school students answered it over just the last year. My next slide has a couple of things that I've learned as a crisis responder. And when somebody has experienced trauma or loss, I'm going to ask something really simply. Primarily, I listen, but when appropriate, I'm going to ask, who or what has helped you? When you've had to deal with something sad in your life before, who or what did you turn to? Everybody always needs to be reminded to think about their existing support system. And I've already shared with you, yes, Jeremy is the boy we always dreamed about. And I hope that's what you think about your sons and daughters. Stable homes. Somehow I doubt that I'm the only person that experienced a divorce. For me, it was 8 times. Just kidding. It was only once. But you know what really helped? My ex-wife is a psychologist. We made a pact. You don't talk badly about me to our children. I won't talk badly about you. And that blended family, my wife and I always say, they're all ours. And we're going to do our best to raise all of them. And all those milestones, all those celebration and birthdays, all the adults are there. Everybody is nice. Isn't that what every kid deserves? So I'll turn it back to, well, I think maybe I have a couple more points that I'm going to make. Here we go. So very often, there's a significant difference between what parents think is going on in their kid's life versus the reality of what's actually happening. You have to be the involved parent. It's not enough for you to know your kid's friends. You got to know your kid's friends' parents. And I'm a really big believer on the family meal. I know our lives are hectic, but 1 or 2 nights a week, everybody needs to sit around that table, free and easy communication. And I have a simple thought about extracurricular activities. Ask your child to pick one a season. Don't you want their life to revolve around your family? The school team, the club team, the school play, the community play, that conflicts and it causes your child stress. Yes, we want their room to be a special place for them, a haven, but it shouldn't be a kingdom. If they've got every technology device known to man, why are they coming out? Elizabeth made dinner for her 2 daughters and watch them try to come out, take that plate of food and go back to their room and eat it in isolation. So make sure that your children interact with the entire family. Create some technology-free times. You know what a lot of moms say? It's my husband. I know we should have a meal without technology, but I can't get him to put down his phone. So there are times when we need to just turn it all off. Let's talk as a family. Let's do something together. All right, moving on to the next slide. And I'll turn that back to you, Dr. Hilsman.
Sure. Well, I love that idea of having more family time, more talks around the table. Why not have a family meeting every week? You can talk about technology, talk about what's going on at school, talk about their concerns. How do we keep kids safe online? Again, I doubt very many of the kids are spending their own money to pay the bill for their devices. So if we have the names on the bills, they are using those devices at our discretion. And I let my kids know that you can use this at my discretion as long as we can abide by this contract that we've set up. Here's what I expect of you. There are a lot of things available out there, but you know what you're allowed and not allowed to see and do online. It's like a city. We want to make sure we go into the safe neighborhoods and we're not diverting ourselves into the side streets where things can run into trouble for our kids. So it's our job. Our name is on the bill. We have to take charge of the technology. We have to have those passwords. We need to know what's on that phone, what's on that computer, what they've been searching up. And I've heard some people call this stalking. Well, the parents are stalking the children. What they need is supervision. As kids get older, they actually need more supervision in middle school and high school than they did in elementary school. In one way, they can get into much more trouble, right? So they can't always just be home alone after school without anything going on and free to come and go with whomever they please. We really need to try to be a part of their lives. Some people like to use Life 360 to keep track of where their kids are. There are all kinds of technology resources for us to help stay involved. And it's not just about, controlling and cracking down. It's about conversations. It's about teaching good decision making, talking through scenarios together. So So let's look at, one of the resources. This is just an example, but Apple Screen Time. And I'm sure most parents are aware of this. But if you look at the children's activities, you can clearly see how much time they've been spending on different apps. You may find an app that they installed that you didn't even know that they had, that you would prefer that they not. If you're not familiar with it, look it up on Common Sense Media. See, maybe it's a positive app that's adding something to their social life, and maybe it's something you'd really rather not have them using at a certain age. So these are all resources that we need to take into hand and manage actively. You know your child when they are shutting off that screen when you walk in the room, when they're starting to withdraw, when they're being grouchy and irritable with you. And it's not just a day because they didn't sleep well or they had a bad time with a friend the day before. If that goes on for several days, you start to notice that, maybe they're struggling a little bit. It's time to bring it up. We're going to talk in a minute about risk factors and warning signs of youth anxiety, youth depression, perhaps even suicidality. We need to be alert and aware of what they're taking in and what they're putting out in their technology.
So very important to just cover a couple of things here. I already talked about the prevalence of depression in teenagers. And when I read about yet another youth suicide, and I got a call from Montana a day or two ago, there's actually no great mystery to it. Untreated or undertreated mental illness, often in combination with adverse childhood experiences. And just know there's evidence-based treatment for depression. Depression and anxiety can run in families. And when that happens, it's like everybody needs to know the importance of treatment. And when mental health issues aren't addressed, it can lead to substance abuse, academic failure, and even suicide. Let's look at a few more signs of depression and distress. So sometimes it's withdrawal. Sometimes it's openly being sad and crying, or a lot of anxiety. Other times they're not eating as well as they used to. They're not able to sleep, or maybe they're sleeping all the time. Maybe they're having problems concentrating at school. Maybe they're increasingly irritable, and maybe they're increasing their consumption of drugs and alcohol, and you're not aware of it. The next slide has some more information about those symptoms of depression. And I really tried to emphasize that when I was talking about, is it pervasive? Is it persistent? Have they dropped out of pleasurable activities? Do they not have a sense of hope for the future? So these are the things to look for when they're happening for several weeks in a row. And Elizabeth, why don't you do the next one about anxiety?
Sure. Well, anxiety is running rampant in our kids right now. And again, we want to see, is this just worry about one test that's coming up? Or is this a pattern that's gone on and on for weeks, even months? If it lasts even 6 months, this can be clinically significant anxiety disorder, and we need to seek treatment for our kids. A lot of depression and anxiety really can show up as irritability and grouchiness. Again, this is just beyond the normal bad day. You may notice that your child has just a change in mood that is so significant. No one knows our kids better than we do. If you notice some kind of change, they're more restless than they used to be. They're more easily tired. They're falling asleep early. They're sleeping much, much, much later than they were. Their mind goes blank. They're not concentrating. This can impact their academics. They may even feel it in their bodies. They may report a lot of tension, headaches, stomach aches, especially before going to school, maybe if there's a test that day, and you start to notice a pattern, right? They're not sleeping as well. This is when we need to really be concerned that all is not well in our child's world. And we need to start asking those questions and saying, listen, this is what I'm noticing. What's up? How are you feeling? They may not be able to say, I feel depressed or I feel anxious, but in their own way, in their own words, hopefully they'll be willing to share with you or another caring adult how they're really feeling so that we can get them some help.
You know, Dr. Wharton has a couple of sessions coming up that Denise mentioned in the beginning of tonight's webinar. And those are going to be all about more information about talking with your kid about difficult subjects, knowing what to look for, knowing what to ask gently. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever known somebody who felt that way? What could we do to help them? This is the part that's really critical, and not hesitating to get help. Turn to school personnel, such as school mental health professionals, to get an idea of where to go for some community-based help. One of my favorite phrases is circle of care, which means parents, teachers, school staff, everybody communicating and working together to safeguard a child. Now, you all have 3 or maybe even 4 cabinets in your home, and you need to take charge of them. The medicine cabinet. We got to lock up those medications. They have caused great problems with young people. The liquor cabinet. You need to pay attention. Maybe it needs to be locked. Maybe you just need to keep an eye on whether or not some of that liquor is disappearing. Probably not everybody has the gun cabinet, but some of you do. Of course, you're going to tell me that the gun is for safety in your home. But could you imagine a time if you have a depressed, substance abusing, maybe even mentally ill person in your home? Does it really make sense to leave a loaded and unlocked gun available? To be honest, in my career, it's been so frustrating to tell parents, I believe your child is suicidal, and they still leave a loaded gun available. One Houston teenager put in her goodbye note to her parents, why did you make this so easy? Why did you leave this gun available to me? I'm not questioning your adult right to own a gun. I'm just saying with that right comes the responsibility to safeguard it from children. And here's the bottom line. We lead the world in school shootings. Where do you think a kid got the gun for the most part that they brought to school to shoot people? From their own homes. Those guns need to be secured. And we've already talked extensively about technology as a privilege. It's not a right. Take charge of the internet. Now, specifically, we have the most common suicide warning signs. They talk about it. They write about it. They post about it. They threaten. They have access to lethal means. They exhibit the signs of depression and anxiety, dramatic changes in their behavior. They may not be taking pride in appearance any longer. They may not be eating properly, big changes in their sleeping pattern. They may be engaging in reckless behavior. They might have had a couple of strange injuries that resulted in a trip to the emergency room. Maybe their intake of substances has increased. Maybe they've even made out a will or given away a prized possession. You know, you may need this information we just went over with somebody in your family. Maybe it's an elderly neighbor. Maybe it's somebody in the workplace. We all need to be able to just simply ask when they see these warning signs. Are you thinking about suicide? You wouldn't be the first person to feel this way. There is help available. I will be there for you every single step of the way. So the next slide, suicide is preventable. Everybody plays a role in prevention. Utilize the 1-800-273-TALK National Suicide Prevention Helpline. It's actually really simple on our smartphones. If I push the button on my Apple phone and I tell Siri I want to kill myself, she immediately says, may I connect you with the National Suicide Prevention Helpline. Now let's look at stressors for children, and actually stressors for all of us. You have work demands. Some of you work in a school, so you have school demands, but we have this normal pattern of demands from school or work, and then demands from our family. We get stressed out. We get tired. We need self-care. And a big misperception is that sometimes people think self-care is selfish. Self-care is about taking care of you. So you're going to be a good partner. So you're going to be a good parent. So you're going to be a good member of your team at work. And we're going to go over pretty quickly, what about self-care for a parent or for an older child, for an adolescent, for example? Diet, exercise, proper rest. Knowing when you need to take a break, slow down, use some mindfulness. And sometimes if we just talk about something that's really bothering us, it's like we get it out of our body. And when we make mistakes, we don't want to hold on to them and continue to be critical of ourselves. We've all made mistakes. And then finding the creative way to express yourself. And I'm going to give, this is a personal example, but I'm going to be honest. My wife got pretty depressed during the height of the pandemic. All these grandchildren that were so important to us, and she couldn't even see them. So what did I do? I bought her a puppy. I bought cars for less than I paid for that puppy, but it gave her a purpose. It gave her somebody. In fact, that puppy is asleep under my chair right now. Sometimes just having a purpose, a pet, somebody that really needs us to take care of them is really important. Then she also discovered paint by numbers. She literally sit at the counter and spend hours actually producing some really great paintings. I took one look at those little tiny lines and thought, my fine motor skills are not going to help. And maybe it's journaling for you. Maybe it's artwork. Maybe it's music. Finding ways to express ourselves. And spiritually, we need to be involved. And for some of us, it's a place of worship. Maybe it's the temple, maybe it's the mosque, maybe it's the church. But for a lot of people, you know what being spiritual really is? It's about, being kind, being compassionate, treating other people well, being empathetic, always being respectful. If I was in my office, I'd get this quote right from Gandhi. But what he said was something like, the greatest challenge of our civilization is to find the unity and the beauty in diversity. We have been really challenged in this last year or so to basically be respectful of everyone, regardless of their race and their religion. That's what we want to model for our young people. It's really embracing others and recognizing the diversity in our country is truly a wonderful thing. And getting outside, taking a walk, riding a bicycle, even just sitting out in the backyard, getting out in the sunshine. And again, the importance of being that positive person for your family and for everybody in your life. And those I can statements are pretty self-explanatory, but I can eat in a healthy way. I can get enough sleep. I can help others. I can get the proper amount of rest. So the message needs to be, I can do these things. And here's something that has worked for me. I set up a worry time. When I'm having those thoughts during the day of all the things I can worry about this world we all live in, I say, tonight, between 8 and 8:20, I'm going to go in the bedroom and I'm going to think about all these worries. But right now, I'm going to concentrate on what's right in front of me. And I've found keeping busy. I've been doing multiple Zoom meetings every week. Keeping busy has actually helped me at this difficult times. So that's for the older children. But you're sitting there thinking, I got little kids. What can a little kid do? Well, you get out the poster board, you have them draw a picture of themselves, or you print out a picture, and then they draw healthy things that they could eat. They draw the things that make them happy. They draw things they can do to help others and how they can get exercise. This next slide is actually from the World Health Organization. And really, as you look at that, pretty much everything there is pretty self-explanatory. And I'm only going to highlight one or two of them. Yes, connections to schools is critically important. I wish every one of your children had one activity, one extracurricular thing at school. That's challenging in these massive schools. Sometimes we have to be pretty good at something, or we had to devote a lot of time, or maybe even our parents paid for special lessons so we can participate in the school teams, for example. But I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Jeremy. He was only 8. And one of the things I didn't share with you tonight is that my life was affected by a suicide. My dad died by suicide. Now, some of you might have lost a loved one to suicide. I have some idea of what you've gone through. But I also know most suicides can be prevented. And suicide prevention is actually driven by us survivors. So Jeremy's 8. Son, I need to talk to you a little more about the death of your grandfather. He said, I mean, I know what happened to him. You said he had a heart attack. I mean, I'm sorry I never met the man. Jeremy, there's a little more of the story. And I was waiting until you got a little older. Now that you're 8, maybe you can understand what this word suicide means. And I want you to hear this from me, never from someone else. And I told him that his grandfather shot himself. He says, you lied to me. No, son, just waiting to give you the complete information. And then he thinks a while. He says, oh, Dad, you shouldn't feel guilty. Oh, why is that? Well, your dad wasn't a psychologist like mine. He probably didn't teach you the importance of feeling good about yourself. And Dad, every kid has problems. They just have to get help from an adult and believe they're going to get through it. Now, wasn't that sweet? He was trying to alleviate my guilt. What's the most important point there? He's 8 years old. He knows he's a good person. He believes whatever comes along, he's going to manage it. He'll get help. I wish I could give you magic dust to sprinkle over the heads of every kid in Broward County tomorrow, so they just all believed they're loved. They're a good person. Whatever comes along, they are going to get through it. This next slide is about what do children need? And by the way, it comes from the Carnegie Foundation. They need significant adults in their lives besides their parents. Most of us have decided, though, if we can just have one significant adult besides parents, that's a pretty darn good thing. And you know what I'm really proud to tell you? I signed up to be a big brother to Rodney. Rodney was 13 years old. We were matched for the Big Brothers program. Do you know, Rodney just turned 60 years old. We've been matched for 47 years. I talked to him just a couple of days ago. Rodney never knew his dad. No males stepped forward in his lives. You know what's really sad? There's like a 4-year waiting list to get a big brother in virtually every city in America. The waiting list to get a big sister, try 4 months. That says a big difference about how women get involved in the lives of kids more often than men. You know what I'm really proud to tell you about our youngest daughter? As soon as she finished college, she signed up She's a big sister to a 12-year-old girl in Houston. Of course, she knew Rodney her entire life. So just know that modeling you do about truly caring and making extra efforts for people, your kids are watching. And of course, we want them all to have this sense of safety, security, and belonging in their home, school, and neighborhood. And organized activities, those are really important. But please don't have your children in so many activities that the activities cause them stress. And adolescents, they need volunteer work. You know, I have a little saying in my office. It says, guess what? The universe does not revolve around you. And when kids actually volunteer and they see people that are really struggling, then they can put their little upsets with their friends in perspective. One more quote, and it's a pretty simple one. Perhaps the only way an adolescent can truly find themselves is through service to other people. I think in many ways, we've already pretty much emphasized every point that's on this slide. But of course, we need to pay careful attention to the horrific violence that your child might be exposed to through our televisions and through our movies. And it's all about a balance between, certainly, it's important for kids to be involved in school and community and with peers, but not at the expense of no longer keeping good, positive relationships in their family. And please don't hesitate to get professional help when somebody is pointing out, and they're going to do it as tactfully as possible, that your child needs help. Don't hesitate. And a last point that's really important. Guess what? Every kid makes mistakes and they need to experience consequences, and they learn from those consequences. Too often, parents don't want kids to experience consequences. And it's a process. It's about growing up. When we make mistakes and poor decisions, poor judgment, we learn from the consequences. So moving on, and maybe Dr. Hilsman, maybe you'd like to do the final thoughts.
Well, sure. We've talked about a lot of things tonight, and I hope that they've been helpful to everyone here. We'll open up the chat in a minute for questions so that we can try to address whatever's on your mind tonight. I think some of the main points that we've talked about is how important our roles are as parents and guardians of our children. How we handle things is going to really influence how our children find their environment to be. Can we stay calm? Can we cope? Can we narrate them through how we do that? What we notice in ourselves when we start to get stressed, and then what we do about it to take care of ourselves. We can think back, what times have been hard for us in the past? And what did we do during those times to get through? Maybe you can think tonight of 3 coping strategies that have helped you in the past. If you just think back to that menu that Dr. Poland talked about, what are 3 things that you could do the next time you start to feel that tension headache coming on? You start to feel those tight shoulders, or start to wake up at 2 a.m. and with so many worried thoughts that you can't get back to sleep. What are some of those self-care strategies that you can take with you tonight and think, I'm going to try that one. Maybe it worked for me before. Maybe it's something new that I've never tried before. Hopefully you came away with something like that for yourselves tonight, and you can teach those to your kids. Again, that positive attitude. With every challenge, you and your family will get through this. Reach out for support. There's so many people who care in our community. Wonderful schools, wonderful teachers, wonderful neighbors and friends, places of worship. So many people who just don't really know that other people are struggling too. I think once we share what we're going through with others, we provide an opportunity for connection. And that's what we're all looking for, isn't it? We're looking for the kinds of connections that protect our children, the kinds of connections that protect us and make our community the wonderful place to live that it is. So again, I love the quote, and this is a famous one from Dr. Poland: be involved and be present in your child's life. Let's not forget, you are the parent. We are the parent. We are the ones who are bigger, stronger, smarter, hopefully kinder, more experienced, so we can take the lead. And maybe you want to share some of these resources for people who are more interested in saving these numbers in their phone. Excellent numbers to have on hand. I have them saved in my phone right here, the National Crisis Talk line, the suicide text line. A lot of kids like to text more than they like to make phone calls these days. So we can let them know anytime they're feeling bad enough to think of something like harming themselves or suicide, they can text home or any other word to 741-741. There is a national crisis line, kind of like 911, that's in the works. It's not released yet, but I think that number is going to be something like 988. So let's all watch the news for when that's released, and that'll be a quick and easy way. In Broward County, 211 is Broward County's first call for help. And that's a place where people can access crisis services, they can access therapy services, and basically get help if they're having financial difficulties, housing problems. We have resources in our community. We just want to get people connected to those. NSU Psychology Services Center has a sliding scale fee therapy clinic, testing clinic. If we're worried that something's going on with our kids that's affecting school, we can have an evaluation done for a very reasonable cost. And there's plenty of other resources there for you to take a look at.
Well, let's see what questions we might have.
All right, I'm going to open up the chat. It's already open. Feel free to submit your questions in the chat box. They'll show up to the panelists and we'll read them and see how we can respond and be helpful to you tonight. So somebody said, this is really a lot of good advice and some of it's common sense. And isn't it interesting how often when we're in a stressful moment, we forget the common sense that we might have had in a calm and peaceful time, and how much it helps just to get a little reminder. That's what we can do for each other in our communities. That's what professionals can also help you all do, is just keep that perspective that, you will get through this, what's worked before. Here's the question. Okay, how can I motivate my teenage son, about 15 years old, to be involved in a sport at school?
Okay, this is really a great question because, to be honest, if it's a massive school, quite a bit of talent and hard work over the years may be necessary. I remember that, our youngest daughter decided she was going to play lacrosse. Well, she was actually pretty athletic and talented, but everybody else had been playing lacrosse for years. And one possibility is that if the school team doesn't work out, there are still lots of community-based places for kids to get involved in sports, like the YMCA, for example, and various organizations. And at the simplest level, sport should be about having fun. It should be about feeling a part of a team. And as someone who worked in schools all those years, sometimes, I'll just quote my son for you. Dad, varsity basketball wasn't really any fun. It was too much pressure. So if the school team's not working out, find some other avenues in the community for the exercise and, just the benefit of being a part of a team.
That's great. Wonderful. Okay, here's another good question. How can the students find their safe zones? And I love that term, their safe zones. Who are their safe zones? You want to take that, Dr. Poland?
Well, I've been busily thinking what all could be meant with the term safe zone.
Mm-hmm.
Is it about being with a good group of friends that are truly kind to each other and not engaging in any behaviors that would be risky? Is it about maneuvering through things academically with generally a feeling of success? Is it about getting along with siblings and parents? You know what? What else do you think is part of the safe zone, Dr. Hilsman?
I think those comments that you made are really good. We can see safe zones in so many ways. And this ties to another really important question. We have emotional safe zones, right? Places where kids feel they can say anything, even if they're angry, we can take it. I think of parents as sort of the crumple zone in a car, right? When they can crash into us and we can absorb it, that their anger isn't going to destroy us, that we can handle it and help them put words to their very strong feelings. Maybe along the lines of what Dr. Wharton will be talking about in a few weeks. It'll, I think, be very helpful for emotional safe zones.
I think that, a really healthy thing for students is to be able to vent strong emotions and basically not be judged for them or not have somebody say, you can't use that language around me. It's just a matter of trying not to judge and truly listen and recognize they're at some kind of really stressed out crisis point.
Yeah, and they lash out at us because they trust us the most.
Mhm.
And so to not personalize that, I think also creates a level of emotional safety for kids, that they feel that they can vent and, maybe they need to apologize later and, be respectful again, but, that we can just kind of be that crash pad or crumple zone for them. So another version of safety has to do with COVID. And we have a good question about that. The kids can feel angry and resentful when we try to follow COVID public safety rules. How do parents navigate having those conversations with kids in terms of needing to mask, whether or not they're indoors or outdoors, whether or not their friends are vaccinated or unvaccinated? How can we deal with kids' feelings around COVID safety?
This has been tremendously a challenge. And, I think we all want to keep politics out of it tonight, but we've had such divisiveness and, and talking with our children, I've just tried to stress, I believe in the Center for Disease Control. I believe that Dr. Fauci is not a guy who's going to lie to us. But then we have to go back to really, what can we control? These are the decisions we make in our family. And hopefully your children will realize they should make those same decisions out there in the community. And just everybody be responsible. Frankly, I think if everybody was responsible, we wouldn't quite be in the situation our country is in. But we're not going to change a lot of the opinions of others, but we got to talk about this in our family in terms of, what do you think would be the best? What do we do in our family? How could you handle that situation? What questions do you need to ask of the other people that you're about to gather with?
Great. And I think too that problem solving and decision making practice in walking kids through, okay, well, what would be the consequences of choice A? And what do you think could be the consequences of choice B? Or what would that be like if we got sick, if we had COVID? How would that affect our ability to keep going to school, to go to work? How would that affect grandma? So, we can talk through some of the consequences. Now, here's another clarification of another kind of safe zone that we need to help our kids find, which is a safe zone at school. And I'm guessing that may have to do with a feeling of physical safety with COVID, may also have to do with friends. What can you say to the parent who's concerned about their child going back to school? The friend groups may have shifted a little bit, trying to find a new place to sit at lunch with kids who are, fun and comfortable to be around, who aren't bullies. Can you talk a little bit about bullying and how a child can find a safe zone at school?
Well, with regards to bullying, one of the saddest things is kids will sometimes say, when something happens to you enough times, you start to think you deserve it. No kid deserves to be bullied. And most kids actually that are the victims of bullying, they at least tried initially to go to adults. But if the adults don't really respond, whether that's an adult at school, an adult in the community, we need to support the kids that are the victim of bullying. We need to provide consequences for the bully. And we all just really need to pay attention. Amazingly, sometimes school officials will say, oh, we don't have any bullying here. Really? All the surveys, all the data from students is basically there's bullying going on in every school in America. And we really need input from students, school staff, parents. We need to work on this everywhere. And bullying isn't just something that happens in school. There's bullying in the workplace as well. And it's quite a challenge in our society. And everybody has to work on it.
Thank you. Here's a really great question too. What do parents need to know about brain development and how it explains teenage behavior and where they're at?
Well, Dr. Hildman, I'll say one or two things and let you take it. But impulsivity is certainly a part of adolescence and not having brains fully developed. And it creates so many challenging times when they just might make a mistake. And how can they learn from those? But I'll let you go ahead and add to that.
Well, I think so. My first degree was developmental psychology, where I got to work with the great Yuri Bronfenbrenner, who helped start the Head Start program and is one of the great developmental psychologists. And he used to talk about how adolescence is like a second toddlerhood in a way. And as a mother of teenagers, I can really relate to that. The brain is being shaped, reformed, reconnected. Some neural connections are being pruned during that time. And emotionally, there's a lot of activity and reactivity going on. Where kids aren't always in control of what they're doing. And what we're trying to do in that age is bring all those emotions that are strong reactions from a child's limbic system up into the frontal cortex, where we can put words to it, where we can use reason, where we can use planning, and more sophisticated thought processes. All those things we want to develop in their brain as they head into their early 20s to mid 20s, where their brain is much more developed. So I think, this idea that kids are going to graduate at 18 from high school and that they should just, I don't know if it was a generational thing, but I experienced this and some of my friends. At 18, you're out of the house, you're done. But kids' brains are not done developing at 18. The idea that kids are in any way ready to be independent at 18 doesn't take into account that brain development that's still going to be lasting for maybe 6 more years, where we are really their mentors as they get older, helping them learn how to make decisions. And all of that starts slowly in elementary school, middle school, high school. We let the reins out. We see if they're mature enough to handle it. If they have bad judgment, they're making poor decisions, maybe we need to set more limits and pull the reins back in a little bit. Maybe they're, struggling against too much control and we're helicopter parenting them and they need a little more freedom. We need to learn to relax our own anxieties, let those reins out a little bit more and watch them run and see how they do, right? And if they're showing us good judgment and they're ready for that responsibility, we, let the reins out a little bit more. So I think that's a great point.
And not every 18-year-old is ready to go off hundreds of miles away to college. I mean, I certainly wasn't. So sometimes take a year and work, go take some classes at the community college, stay with the family, and then maybe they'll be really ready to go off to a university out of town in a year or two.
Good. Okay. Well, let's see. Here's another good question about how do we help young children with academic anxiety? And, when I think about what kindergarten, what pre-K grades were like when many of us were young, it was probably mostly playing. And I know when I toured and interviewed every single, preschool within a certain radius of my home with all of my checklists. And, every time I look for a school, and I've homeschooled, I've been in public schools, I've been in religious private schools, I've been in secular private schools, I've been in all the different schools. One thing that really sticks with me is how early we're pushing those academics onto kids. And they're missing out on a lot of the good playtime, pretend playtime, social time. So it's sad to me that anxiety is starting so young for academics when kids developmentally, they're all in different places, boys and girls and different kids. So it's really sad to me that every child is have to write their letters at the age of 3 and then learn how to read by age 4. We put that pressure onto kids at school sometimes. And so one answer that I would say is really to relieve that and balance it out at home by providing a lot of relaxed playtime, relaxed social time, and maybe not taking it as seriously is one thing that I've done in the past when I've had that with my kids, that it's not the end of the world. Sometimes in the middle of the year, there's somebody moving into the classroom who may not even speak English. So the kids, who are suffering from academic anxiety, they may already be ahead enough that we can encourage them to spend some time doing other things at home.
I like that answer because the academic pressure in our schools, it's going to be there. It largely comes from our legislature, but we can be relaxed about it in our homes.
Yeah, and I like that, what you talked about, Dr. Poland, about you can completely, have a bad year and somehow life turns out okay. And I always try to tell my kids, there is no problem that we cannot solve together. There's no mistake that we can't somehow figure out. And I think what drives a lot of anxiety and what drives kids to feel desperate sometimes is that idea that there's only one way to be, that everyone has to be perfect, that they can't make mistakes, that there's no way back when they have made a mistake. And I think just modeling comfort with mistakes, like, whoops, I just made a mistake. And we can do that when we're cooking in the kitchen. We can do it when we're, working on something out in the yard. What should I do? What should I do? I made a mistake. Let's see. How could we problem solve around this? Right? Or, oh, look, I didn't do this very well, but I'm going to just make a correction here and it's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. That modeling. Well, let's take one more question. It's a little more detailed, but I think a lot of parents have this question, which again is about the appropriate age for kids to have technology. And we've already emphasized that each child is a little bit different, maybe at a different place maturity-wise. Children have different circumstances and environments where some kids are in aftercare, and maybe they need access to a phone for safety reasons because they're walking home from school or they need to be picked up from aftercare. So, there's no one right age, but how would you respond to that question of what age is appropriate for kids to start to have technology?
Well, I think you made some good points. I like the website commonsensemedia.org because it has lots of developmental guidance. And I'm remembering this was a private school in Houston, and the mom of an 8-year-old was basically, I want to get my daughter an iPhone, but I'm not really sure that I want her to have 24-hour internet access. Wow, let me think about that, Mom. When did I actually get a cell phone? Man, I think I was 57 years old. And then I was like, why does your daughter need it at all? Well, all of her friends have it. Well, you need to make the decisions that are best for your family. And I asked the mom a few more questions. And she said, my daughter goes to a private school. Okay, you drive her up to the school every morning. Yes, they open the door and she gets out and they escort her into the school. What about the afternoon? Well, they actually put her in my car in the afternoon. Why does she need a cell phone at all? She's with adults every moment of the day. And then there's the thought, we do have the old flip style phones. And having done a number of these webinars, sometimes parents have said, well, maybe he was right. Why did I get my kid a $1,000 phone? Because they lost it. So it could be a simple phone, one that they can get in touch with you, you can get in touch with them, but they're not going to be surfing the internet. So you have to make those hard decisions, but gather information. And it should never be about, well, everybody else's kid has it. It should be what is best for your child and their development and their level of responsibility. But I would also say, don't be in a hurry. One time I got quite a response when I said, don't let technology steal your child. A guy jumped up and said, it already has. And that's maybe the case for most of your older children. But those of you who have younger children, go slow with this process. And remember, you are the parent. In a presentation years ago at U School, I almost wanted to have the parents stand up and repeat after me, I am the parent. My happiness does not depend on whether or not my 11-year-old likes me right now. But I didn't go to that length. But the principal called me and said, the parents love what you had to say. They want you to come back. Well, why would I come back? They want you to tell their children why they're going to change some things. It's like they missed the main emphasis of the whole presentation. Every one of you is the parent. You love your children, and please let them know tonight, yes, they are the sons and daughters you always dreamed of. You make mistakes, they make mistakes, and we all learn from those mistakes. So thank you for your attendance tonight. And Elizabeth, do you have any final statement you'd like to make?
I just want to thank everybody for coming, for caring for their children, for being part of this wonderful community that we have here in Broward County, whether it's in Plantation or at Nova or wherever you are. There is support there for you as a parent. You don't have to suffer alone. You don't have to isolate yourself. Come out of if we can all come back out of our houses and reconnect with each other, I think that this year will go much more smoothly for us and for our kids.
And thank you, Denise Horland and Dr. Perez, for all you've done, both of you, to set up this meeting. Everybody have a great evening.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, Scott. Thank you, Elizabeth.